I used to think that nothing could come between my mother and me. We were more than mother and daughter. We were best friends. We shared morning coffees, quiet walks, and long talks that stretched past midnight. She was my compass, my safe place, the one person who could read my silence better than my words. And then, he arrived. His name was Michael. At first, he seemed like the answer to my mother's loneliness. After Dad passed, she'd spent years hiding behind her garden and her volunteer work, pretending she was fine. So when Michael showed up, kind, attentive, and patient, I wanted to believe he was good for her. He brought her flowers every Sunday, fixed the squeaky porch door, and listened when she spoke. I could see her eyes light up again, and for that, I was grateful. She deserved happiness, even if it came wrapped in someone new. But something changed after the first few months. It started small. Whispers instead of laughter. Glances instead of smiles. Michael's compliments began to sound like rehearsed lines, and his helpful advice started to feel like quiet control. He'd interrupt Mom when she spoke, just to clarify. He'd question her memories, just to make sure she was right. And slowly, subtly, he began to include me in his corrections. Once over dinner, he said with a half smile, "Your daughter has strong opinions, doesn't she, Mary? Maybe too strong sometimes." Mom laughed, lightly, but her eyes flickered toward me, uncertain. That was the first time I saw it, the seed of doubt. I brushed it off, thinking I was overreacting. But soon, the air in our home began to shift. Michael would find ways to be alone with Mom, whispering behind closed doors. When I'd walk in, they'd stop talking, as if my presence had disrupted something private. And when I'd ask what was wrong, Mom would smile, but it wasn't the same smile I'd known all my life. It was guarded, rehearsed. One night, I heard them arguing. I stayed at the top of the stairs, my heart pounding. "She's my daughter, Michael," Mom said, her voice trembling. "And I'm just trying to protect you," he replied smoothly. "She doesn't understand what's best for you." That was the moment I knew. He wasn't protecting her. He was isolating her. The next morning, Mom barely looked at me. She said she was just tired, but I could feel it. The wall between us had started to form. Days turned into weeks, and our conversations became shorter. I'd try to make plans, but she'd say she was busy, always with him. When I visited, he'd answer the door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Once, I brought her a photo album, memories from our family trips, birthdays, small moments that used to make her laugh. But as she flipped through it, she sighed and said quietly, "You need to stop living in the past." Those words broke me. They weren't hers. They were his. The more time passed, the more I realized that Michael wasn't just taking up space in her life. He was rewriting her version of it. He'd tell her I was being manipulative, that I was jealous of their relationship, and slowly she began to believe him. One evening, I arrived unannounced. I could hear their voices through the door, low, tense. "She doesn't respect you," he said. "She only comes around when she needs something." "That's not true," Mom whispered. "Then why hasn't she called you all week? Why does she always question me?" I stepped back before knocking. My hand was shaking. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel welcome in my own mother's home. A few days later, she called me. Her voice was cold, distant. "I think you should give us some space," she said. "Space? From you?" I asked, my throat tightening. "You've been difficult lately. Michael says you've been trying to create tension." That was it. He had turned her completely against me. That night, I sat in my car outside her house, watching the light in her living room window. The curtains were drawn, but I could see their silhouettes. Hers, calm and trusting. His, standing just close enough to own the room. It felt like watching someone steal her soul piece by piece. And she was letting him. I wanted to storm in, to shake her, to tell her she was being manipulated. But I also knew it would only make things worse. Michael was too clever, too patient. He'd twist everything I said until I became the problem, So I did nothing. I drove away. That night I cried harder than I had in years. Not because I'd lost my mother, but because she no longer saw me for who I was. And that's when I realized something terrible. He hadn't just divided us, he had rewritten her love. But deep down, I made myself a promise. If he was clever enough to destroy what we had, I would be clever enough to expose him. This was not over. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between us grew heavier. Mom used to call me every evening. Small things, like asking what I had for dinner or telling me about a recipe she had tried. Those calls stopped. The house felt quieter now, not because the world had changed, but because something inside me had. I still tried to reach out. I left her messages, gentle ones. Hey Mom, just checking in. Miss you. Sometimes she would reply hours later with a single line. I'm fine, honey. Busy with Michael. That name, Michael, started to feel like a wall I could never climb. He was everywhere in her life. Her conversations began with him and ended with him. Even the way she spoke had changed. She sounded careful now, as if every word had to be approved before leaving her lips. One Sunday morning, I drove over to surprise her. I told myself I was just being a caring daughter, but deep down, I needed to see her. When I arrived, Michael answered the door. His smile was polite but tight, like he had been expecting me, or hoping I would not come. Oh, hi, he said, leaning against the doorframe. Mary's resting. She's had a long night. I'll wait, I replied, forcing a smile. He hesitated before stepping aside. Of course, but please keep it brief. She's fragile today, fragile. The word stung. Mom was the strongest woman I knew, or she used to be. When I walked in, the house smelled like disinfectant instead of her usual lavender candles. The curtains were half closed and there were papers scattered across the dining table. Bills, letters, and what looked like bank statements. Mom came down the hallway slowly, her robe tied loosely around her waist. Sweetheart, she said, surprised. You didn't call. I wanted to see you. I said softly. It's been too long. She smiled faintly, but her eyes darted toward Michael in the kitchen. I've just been tired. He's been helping me with a lot of things. I followed her gaze to the table. You don't need to worry about all that, I said, reaching for one of the papers. Before I could touch it, Michael's voice cut through the air. She's fine, he said, appearing behind me. We've got everything under control. It was such a simple sentence, but the way he said we sent a chill through me. Mom's shoulders tensed. Don't start, please, she murmured to him, not looking at me. Start what? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Michael shrugged. You always think someone's out to get her. Maybe you should trust her judgment for once. I clenched my fists. This isn't about judgment. It's about making sure she's okay. Mom sighed. Enough, both of you. I can make my own decisions. That was the first time she raised her voice at me. And though her words were meant to sound strong, they broke something inside me. I nodded and stepped back. You're right, Mom. Of course. Michael smiled faintly, satisfied, and placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't move it away. When I left that day, she didn't walk me to the door. She just stood there, watching as I drove away, her figure small in the doorway, half in shadow, half in light. For the next few weeks, I kept my distance. I thought maybe if I gave her space, she'd come back to me on her own. But silence became our new language. Every now and then, she'd send me pictures of the garden, of dinners Michael cooked, of little home repairs he'd done. It was like she was trying to convince herself that everything was perfect. But in her eyes, behind those faint smiles, I saw exhaustion, a quiet kind of sadness that no filter could hide. Then, one evening, I received a message from her friend, Clara. Are you okay? It read, I replied, why? Because your mother seemed off. I tried visiting, but Michael said she wasn't feeling well. That was enough to send my heart racing. I called Mom immediately. Michael answered. Hey, he said casually. She's resting. Like I told Clara. Let me talk to her. She's asleep. At 7 in the evening? I snapped. He chuckled softly. You sound just like her doctor. Don't worry, she's fine. The call ended before I could say more. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in my apartment felt louder. The ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, the faint echo of my own heartbeat. Something was wrong. I could feel it. The next morning, I drove to her house again, unannounced. Her car was in the driveway, but the curtains were still drawn. I rang the bell once, twice, 3 times. No answer. Finally, Michael opened the door, looking irritated. You can't keep showing up like this, he said. Where's my mother? He sighed and stepped aside. Inside. But please don't upset her. Mom was sitting in the living room staring out the window. She looked pale, distant. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the table beside her. Mom, I said softly, kneeling beside her. Are you okay? She turned slowly, blinking as if waking from a dream. Of course, dear. Just tired. Her hand trembled when she reached for mine. I could smell alcohol mixed with her perfume. Are you drinking more lately? I asked gently. Michael appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. She's fine. We all need to relax sometimes, I ignored him. Mom, please. Talk to me. But she just smiled, the same distant smile that no longer belonged to her. When I left that evening, she hugged me briefly. It was a hollow hug, one that said goodbye more than I love you. As I drove away, tears blurred the road. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had lost her. Not to death, but to something far crueler. She was still alive. But the silence between us was killing everything we had ever been. The night everything shattered didn't start with a fight. It began with a message. It was a Thursday evening, the kind that usually passed quietly. I had just finished dinner when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should check on your mother. She's not okay. My stomach dropped. I replied instantly, who is this? But no answer came. Only silence. I tried calling Mom, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried again. And again. Still nothing. By the 4th call, panic had taken over reason. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to her house, the entire time replaying every warning, every instinct I had ignored. When I arrived, the lights were on, but the front door was slightly open. I pushed it gently and called out, Mom. The living room was a mess. Papers scattered across the floor, a vase knocked over, the faint smell of alcohol and something else. Something sour. I found her sitting on the couch, her hands trembling around an empty wine glass. Her eyes were red, unfocused. Mom, I whispered, rushing to her side. What happened? She looked at me as if she didn't recognize me at first. Then her lips quivered. He said I embarrassed him. Michael? She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. We had dinner with his friends. I laughed at something someone said, and later he told me I made him look foolish. He yelled. I clenched my jaw. Did he hurt you? Her silence was answer enough. That was the moment something inside me broke. The quiet endurance, the waiting, the endless worrying. It all snapped into something sharp and clear. He can't stay here, I said firmly. You need to leave him, she flinched. No, you don't understand. He's just under stress. Mom, he's abusing you. Her eyes widened as if I had said something blasphemous. Don't call it that. Then what would you call it? Controlling you? Cutting me out? Making you afraid to speak? She covered her face with her hands. Please stop. I softened my voice. Mom, please. I just want you safe. Before she could answer, the front door slammed. Michael walked in, his expression unreadable. Well, he said, tossing his keys onto the table. Isn't this cozy? I stood up immediately. We were just talking, he smirked. I can see that. His eyes flicked to Mom. Were you telling her more lies? Lies? I snapped. She's scared of you. He chuckled, a low, controlled sound. She's emotional. You always twist things, don't you? Mom stood shakily. Please, both of you, stop. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I'm done pretending you're good for her, I said, my voice rising. You isolate her, control her, make her question herself? You're a parasite, Michael. His jaw tightened. You should leave. I took a step forward. Or what? Mom gasped. Stop it. Michael took a slow breath, his tone calm but dangerous. Mary, this is exactly what I mean. She doesn't respect you, your choices, or your life. She's always undermined you. That's not true, I said, shaking my head, but Mom's silence cut deeper than any words could. She didn't defend me. She didn't defend herself. She just stood there, frozen, torn between two worlds. Mom, I whispered, please tell him to go. Her eyes filled with tears. I think you should leave, sweetheart. It felt like the room tilted. Mom? She turned away. You've made things too difficult. I just need peace. Peace? I said, my voice cracking. He's destroying you! Michael placed a hand on her shoulder, almost possessive. She's finally realizing who truly cares about her. That was it. The final twist of the knife. I grabbed my bag, my vision blurring through tears. You'll regret this, Mom, I whispered. When you finally see him for who he is, I just hope it's not too late. Michael smirked as I passed him. You always had a flair for drama. I didn't look back. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. Through the window, I could see their silhouettes. His towering over hers slumped and small. I wanted to go back inside, to drag her out if I had to, but I knew it would only make her cling tighter to him. Manipulators feed on defiance. I had to think differently, so instead, I took out my phone and started documenting everything. Texts, missed calls, the date, the state of the house, even her messages that didn't sound like her. Something told me I would need proof one day. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, haunted by her voice. I just need peace. Peace had never sounded so much like surrender. The next morning, Clara called. I heard about last night, she said quietly. Are you okay? I swallowed hard. She made me leave. Oh, sweetheart. Clara hesitated. I know it's not my place, but I've seen how he talks to her. Something's not right in that house. Her words confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot, because when love turns blind, truth becomes the only weapon left, and I wasn't going to stop until Mom saw what I saw. Even if it meant breaking her heart to save her life. The first clue came, quietly, like a whisper trying to survive a storm. Week had passed since that awful night, and I had tried to stay away. I told myself it was her choice, that she had made her bed and I needed to respect that. But deep down I knew better. My mother wasn't herself anymore. She wasn't thinking freely. She was being controlled. Then Clara called again. Her voice was hushed, uneasy. I went by your mom's house today, she said. Michael told me she was asleep, but I saw her through the window. She looked lost. Something inside me twisted. I'm going over there, I said without thinking. No, wait, Clara urged. You should know something first. I heard him at the hardware store the other day. He was arguing with someone on the phone about money. It sounded serious. Money. That word hit me hard. When Dad passed, Mom had inherited a decent amount from his estate. She wasn't rich, but she was comfortable. Michael had come into her life right after she updated her finances. I had brushed off the timing then, but now, it all felt deliberate. That night, I sat down at my computer and began searching public records, trying to find anything connected to Michael. What I discovered made my skin crawl. He had changed addresses 5 times in the last 8 years. Each move followed the same pattern. A woman, a short relationship, and then a financial dispute, lawsuits, debts, all, quietly buried under different counties and aliases. My hands trembled as I printed everything out. Pages of, evidence that painted the man my mother trusted as a predator, a manipulator who used affection as a weapon. Still, it wasn't enough. Mom would never believe me unless I could show her something undeniable, something from inside her own life. The next morning, I drove to her house while she was out running errands. I knew her schedule well enough. She still went to the same market every Friday morning. When I pulled into the driveway, my heart pounded so loudly I thought it might echo through the quiet street. The house felt different, cold, almost lifeless. Inside, everything was spotless, almost too spotless. It was the kind of clean that hides things, not the kind that comforts you. I went straight to the small office off the hallway, the one she and Dad had once shared. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and dust. On the desk sat a thick folder labeled Financials. I hesitated before opening it. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but I was desperate. Inside, I found recent bank statements. I flipped through them and my breath caught. Large withdrawals, frequent transfers, thousands of dollars disappearing into an account I didn't recognize. Then, among the papers, I found something else. A life insurance form. A new one. Dated just a few weeks ago. My mother had changed her beneficiary. Michael's name was on the document. For a moment, I just stared, frozen. Then the realization hit me all at once. He wasn't just using her for comfort or control. He was setting her up for something worse. I took pictures of everything. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the camera steady. Then I heard the sound of a car door outside. Panic surged through me. I shoved the papers back into the folder and slipped out through the back door, heart hammering. Through the kitchen window, I saw them walk in together. Mom was carrying groceries, and Michael followed close behind, his hand resting on her back like a silent command. She looked thinner, weaker. When she set the bags down, I could see a faint bruise on her wrist. He said something to her I couldn't hear, but the tone was sharp, controlling. She flinched. I crouched low by the fence, watching through a small gap in the wood. I hated myself for spying, but I couldn't turn away. Mom reached for a carton of milk and he grabbed it from her, slamming it on the counter. Her lips moved, apologizing. Apologizing for what? For existing the wrong way? I couldn't take it anymore. I backed away slowly and slipped out through the side gate, my heart in my throat. Once in the car, I sat there shaking. I wanted to run back in, to drag her away, but I knew I needed a plan, not emotion. Michael thrived on chaos. I had to be smarter. That night, I called a lawyer, my father's old friend. Mr. Grant. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but when I explained the situation, his voice turned serious. "Send me what you found," he said. "If she's being manipulated financially, there may still be a way to protect her assets, but we'll need proof." I sent him the files, the statements, the photos. Within an hour, he called back. "Everything you said checks out," he confirmed. "This man has a pattern. I'll help you, but your mother has to be willing to face the truth." That was the hardest part, because right now she wasn't ready to see it. Still, something in my gut told me that the truth had a way of surfacing, even when people tried to bury it. 2 days later, it did. Clara called again, frantic. "He's yelling at her," she whispered. "Right now, outside in the driveway. I can hear him from my porch." I grabbed my keys and drove like my life depended on it. When I arrived, I could see them from the road. Michael stood towering over Mom, shouting. She was crying, her hands up in surrender. Before I could stop myself, I was out of the car. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the air. "Get away from her!" He spun around, his expression hardening. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, walking toward them. "You've done enough. Stay out of this," he growled. Mom turned to me, her face streaked with tears. "Please go home. Don't make it worse." "Mom, look at me," I said gently, ignoring him. "This isn't love. You're not safe with him." For the first time, I saw it, the flicker of doubt in her eyes. The beginning of realization. Michael grabbed her arm. "Get in the house, Mary." I stepped forward. "Touch her again, and I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." He froze, his jaw tightening. She looked between us, trembling. Something inside her shifted. "No," she whispered. "I'm done. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But in that moment, it was everything. And as I watched her step back from him for the first time, I realized the truth wasn't just beginning to surface. It was ready to explode. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of both dread and determination. I knew things had shifted, I could feel it. For the first time, Mom had stood up to him. It was a small step, but it was real. Still, I could not shake the fear that Michael would retaliate. He was the kind of man who never let go easily. He'd tighten his grip before he lost control. I decided I could not wait for the next storm. I needed to be ready for it. That day, I met Mr. Grant at his office downtown. He had already gone through the documents I sent and was looking into Michael's financial records. When I walked in, he had a file open on his desk and a grim look on his face. "This man has done this before," he said flatly. "3 women, that we know of. Each relationship ended in a restraining order or a bankruptcy. He's smart enough to move around before anyone can prosecute him. But your mother's case is different. Her name is clean, and her assets are still in her control. We can act before it's too late." He slid a document toward me. "This is a financial protection order. If we can get her to sign, we can freeze joint accounts and stop him from touching her money." I nodded. "I'll talk to her." Mr. Grant gave me a look of warning. "Be careful. If he senses what's happening, he might do something reckless. You need proof of his threats, not just suspicions." I left his office with the papers tucked in my bag and a knot forming in my stomach. That evening, I drove to Mom's house again. This time she opened the door before I even knocked. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. "He's gone for now," she whispered. "Said he needed some time to think." "I do not know what that means." "It means he's planning something," I said softly. "Mom, please, we need to talk." We sat in the living room. The silence between us was heavy, but not hostile anymore. She looked exhausted, as if she had been fighting an invisible war for months. "I do not know how it got this far," she finally said. "He was kind at first. He helped around the house, made me laugh again. Then slowly, everything I did was wrong. Every word, every friend, every memory of your father. He turned them into something ugly." Her voice cracked. And I believed him. I took her hand. "You were vulnerable, Mom. That's what men like him look for. But it's not too late to stop him." She hesitated, then nodded weakly. "What do you need me to do?" That was when I showed her the documents, the withdrawals, the fake accounts, the new insurance form. She looked at them with growing horror. "He said that was just to simplify things," she whispered. "No, Mom," I said gently. "He's setting you up. Once that form is processed, if anything happens to you." Her face went pale. "Oh my God." I took out the protection order from my bag. "If you sign this, we can block him legally. He'll lose access to everything tied to your finances." She stared at the paper for a long moment. Her hands trembled. Then, with a deep breath, she signed. That night, I stayed at her house. It felt safer that way, or at least it was supposed to. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by a sound from downstairs, the front door creaking open. I froze. A low voice echoed faintly. "Mary?" It was him. Mom stirred in the next room, half asleep. I pressed a finger to my lips and whispered, "Stay here." Then I grabbed my phone and crept toward the stairs. Michael was standing in the hallway, his shirt half unbuttoned, eyes glassy with rage or alcohol, maybe both. "What are you doing here?" I said firmly. He sneered. "This is my house, too." "No, it's not," I said. "You need to leave." He stepped closer, his jaw tight. "You think you can turn her against me? You have no idea what she needs." I held my phone up. "If you take one more step, I'll call the police." For a long moment, he just glared at me. Then his eyes darted toward the coffee table. My stomach dropped. The documents were there. The ones she signed. He saw them. Before I could move, he lunged. I grabbed the papers, but he was faster. We struggled, his hand on my wrist, mine clutching the folder. Mom's voice cut through the chaos. "Michael, stop!" He froze, panting. She stood at the top of the stairs holding her phone. "The police are on their way." He looked at her. really looked at her, and something in his face broke. "You'll regret this," he spat, then stormed out the door. The house fell silent except for the sound of my mother's sobs. When the officers arrived, they took our statements and promised to patrol the area through the night. Mr. Grant filed the order the next morning, making it official. Michael could no longer come near her or access a single cent. It should have felt like victory. But something still didn't sit right. A few days later, I went to pick up the last of his things from her house. As I packed a box in the garage, something caught my eye. A small black device hidden behind the air vent. I pulled it out. A recorder. I pressed play. At first, just static, then at voices. My mother's, his, conversations from weeks ago. Private ones, arguments, financial discussions. He had been recording her, probably to use against her later, but then came another voice. His, on the phone, with someone else. "She's worth at least $200,000 in policies," he said. "I just need her to sign the rest before the end of the month. Once that's done, I'll disappear." My blood ran cold. I sent the recording straight to Mr. Grant. Within hours, he had it submitted as evidence. The police reopened an investigation into Michael's previous victims, and this time, they had proof. That night, as I sat beside my mother on the couch, watching the evening light fade across the living room, she turned to me and whispered, "I do not know how I let him in." I squeezed her hand. "Because you have a good heart. But now you see him clearly." She nodded, her eyes distant but stronger than before. "I want my life back." Outside, a patrol car idled quietly by the curb, a silent guardian in the darkness. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace, not because the fight was over, but because the truth had finally found its voice. It had been 2 weeks since Michael was forced out of Mom's life. 2 weeks since she had finally signed the papers that protected her home, her savings, and everything Dad had left behind. But the shadow he cast lingered, in the way she checked the locks twice each night, in the way she jumped at every unexpected sound. I was doing better at pretending to be calm. For her sake. But the truth was, I knew this was not over. Men like Michael did not walk away quietly, not when control was their only currency. One morning, Mr. Grant called me into his office. "You need to hear this," he said, sliding a printed email across the table. It was from a detective working on the reopened case. Michael had been seen in another state. He was trying to sell a car under a fake name. But the address he used was familiar, the same P.O. box he used during the months he lived with my mother. "He's not gone," I murmured. "No," Mr. Grant said, his tone grim. "He's circling back. I think he's waiting for the right moment." That night, I could not sleep. Every creak of the floorboards made me tense. When the phone rang just after midnight, I nearly dropped it. It was Mom. Her voice was shaking. "He called me." "What?" he said. He said he just wanted to talk. That he forgave me. But then he said something strange. "You'll understand soon enough." Then he hung up. I felt my pulse quicken. "Mom, lock every door and window right now. I'm coming over." By the time I reached her house, my headlights cut through the fog like thin blades of light. The place looked still, too still. I rushed to the door, knocked once, then twice. She opened it slowly, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "I did what you said." "Good," I said, glancing around the room. "I'll stay here tonight." But before I could even set my bag down, I noticed the faintest flicker from outside, the reflection of headlights. A car parked across the street, engine running. "Mom?" I whispered. "Stay behind me." I stepped toward the window and pulled the curtain just enough to peek through. It was him. Michael sat in the driver's seat, face half lit by the dashboard glow. He looked calm. Too calm, I reached for my phone and called the police. "He's here," I told them quietly. Outside my mother's house. The dispatcher assured me help was on the way, but those 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. Then, the engine outside cut off. The driver's door opened. "Stay back," I hissed. as I heard the crunch of gravel under his shoes. He walked up the path, each step deliberate. Then he knocked, gently, almost politely. "Mary," his voice called. "We need to talk." "Do not answer," I said firmly. But Mom's eyes were full of tears. "He sounds so different." "He's manipulating you," I snapped softly. "Do not open that door." The knocking turned to pounding. "Mary," he shouted now. "You think you can just erase me? After everything I've done for you?" The sound of sirens cut through the night like thunder. Michael froze, turning toward the flashing lights approaching the corner. Then, in a burst of anger, he kicked the door. Wood splintered, the frame shuddering. And then the police car screeched to a stop out front. Officers jumped out, shouting commands. Michael raised his hands, still yelling, "She's lying. She's the one who—" They did not let him finish. He was handcuffed within seconds. Mom collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The officers stayed for nearly an hour, documenting everything. By the time they left, dawn was breaking. I made her tea as we sat in silence. The morning light spilled across the living room floor, warm and clean, washing away some of the night's terror. "He's gone," I said finally. She nodded, her voice small. "I want to believe that." Over the next few days, news trickled in. Michael was being charged with fraud, extortion, and stalking, not just for what he did to Mom, but for what he did to 3 other women before her. The recordings I found in the garage became crucial evidence. When the trial began, Mom refused to hide. She sat in the front row, her hands folded, eyes clear. Michael looked at her only once during the proceedings, and for the first time, I saw something that resembled fear in him. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Mom let out a slow, trembling breath. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, asking questions. She simply said, "I trusted him with everything. But trust without truth is a trap. And I'm done living in traps." That night we had dinner together for the first time in months without tension in the air. The quiet between us was peaceful, full of something that felt like healing. "I kept thinking it was my fault," she said softly, looking at her cup, "that I should have seen it sooner." "You were trying to love," I said. "That's not a crime," she smiled faintly. "You're your father's daughter. He always believed love could survive anything, even betrayal." We sat there in that small kitchen, the same one I grew up in, and for the first time in years, I felt like home had returned to us. Before I left that night, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled through the lump in my throat. I never could. As I drove away, the moon hung low in the sky, silver and calm, a quiet witness to everything we had survived. For the first time in a long while, I did not feel fear. I felt strength, the kind that comes after truth has done its work, and I knew the reckoning was not just his. It was ours too. The price had been high, but what we reclaimed was worth more than anything he tried to take. Dignity, peace, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. It had been 3 months since the trial. The days had begun to feel normal again, slow, quiet, full of small, tender moments that once seemed impossible. The kind of mornings where sunlight touched the curtains and the sound of birds replaced the echo of fear. Mom had moved back into the house she almost lost, but this time it felt different. The pictures of Dad were back on the walls, the flowers she loved were blooming again in the garden, and the air no longer carried that heavy silence that Michael had left behind. When I visited her one Saturday morning, she was sitting by the window with a cup of tea, her posture relaxed, her face soft in a way I had not seen in years. "You look peaceful," I said. Placing my hand on her shoulder, she smiled. "I feel peaceful." We sat together quietly, watching the light shift across the living room floor. There was something healing in the stillness, something sacred about surviving the storm and realizing the sky could still be beautiful. After a while, she spoke. "I used to think trust was something you gave once, like a gift. I didn't realize it's something you have to protect." I nodded. He made you forget who you were. She looked at me thoughtfully. Yes, but you reminded me. You didn't shout, you didn't force me. You just stayed. Her words hit something deep inside me. I had spent months angry at her blindness, her silence, her refusal to see what was happening. But now, sitting beside her, I realized that love sometimes meant waiting for someone to find their strength again. I didn't stay because I was strong, I said softly. I stayed because you're my mother, and I couldn't let him erase you. She reached out and took my hand. He almost did, but we're still here. The truth was, recovery did not look dramatic. It wasn't fireworks or tears or grand gestures. It was quiet, a slow rebuilding of trust, one conversation, one laugh, one meal at a time. Mom started volunteering at the local shelter, helping other women who had faced similar situations. She told them her story not with shame but with courage. And every time she spoke, I could see the weight lift a little more from her shoulders. One evening, after one of her meetings, she said, I used to think the worst thing that could happen was being betrayed. But now I think the worst thing would have been never knowing the truth, I smiled. The truth hurts, but it frees us, she nodded. Yes, it always does. That night, as I drove home, I found myself thinking about Dad, about the lessons he left behind. He used to say that family was not about perfection, but persistence. It wasn't about never falling, but about getting back up, together. And maybe that was what this entire journey had been about. We had fallen hard, but we got back up. Weeks later, we received a letter from the court. Michael had been sentenced to several years in prison. There was no joy in the news, only relief. Justice had finally done what love could not. I sat with Mom as she read the letter. When she finished, she folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. That chapter's over, she said quietly. Yes, I said. But our story isn't. She looked at me, her eyes full of warmth. No, it isn't. We went out to the garden, the evening light painting everything gold. She touched the flowers, the same ones she had planted with Dad years ago, and smiled. I think he'd be proud of you, I said. She looked up at the sky. Of us. And in that moment I knew she was right. We had both changed. She had rediscovered her voice, her independence, her worth. And I had learned that sometimes love means fighting for someone long after they've forgotten how to fight for themselves. Healing didn't come from revenge. It came from truth, from the courage to face it, no matter how ugly. That night, I went home and opened my journal. For months, I had been documenting everything, every fear, every moment of doubt. But now, for the first time, I wrote something different. She's free, and so am I. I closed the journal, set it aside, and exhaled. The past still existed, but it no longer ruled us. The pain was real, but it no longer defined us. In the quiet, I thought of Mom, her laughter returning, her eyes clear again, her heart finally safe. The woman who once trusted blindly had learned to trust wisely, and the daughter who once carried guilt had learned that love, in its truest form, is not about saving someone. It's about standing beside them until they save themselves. As I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, the silence around me felt different, not empty, not haunted, just still, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm, when the world is washed clean. For the first time in a long while, I felt like we had both come home. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to breathe, to remember your own strength and the quiet power of truth. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that speak to the soul. Stories of courage, love, and the kind of healing that only time and truth can bring.